good movie.
Yeah, but perhaps Major Kong was not the most glowing depiction of a bomber pilot ever appearing on
Not
film.
really. Nope. So anyway, interesting.
So, so how did you progress within the military after that point? I mean, I know at a certain time you were no longer flying bomber missions, and you became a military attaché in Madagascar. How did that come about?
Well, events just kind of progressed, and so I finally volunteered for attaché duty and a lot of interviews. And a good friend, full colonel
Mm-hmm.
from Japan that I knew then, uh, had kind of said he'll be a good attaché. And he prevailed. And they interviewed me and my wife and decided he'd be a good choice. It turned out to be a wonderful choice for my wife, particularly. That just fit her to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I had control of a C-47 airplane
Okay.
that had U.S. Of America, and I was in control of the crew, and of course my attaché duties, and control of the airplane. It was like it was my own airplane, and
Wow.
so we arranged our schedule so it covered all the bases.
So when you are a military attaché, I think most of us have seen it depicted, in one time or
Yeah.
another, in movies. But what are the actual typical day to day duties, especially in a place like Madagascar, for a military attaché?
Well, it Madagascar is a military type country. Uh, it was originally kind of independent, but very much under French control economically and all that.
Right.
So it was interesting. The fact that I was also military gave me a special kind of relationship with those guys, and it was wonderful. So I became very close to the ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
Visited him after all that officials when we were both civilians. Anyway, uh, it worked out very good for me because I was military.
Right.
So I had a special relationship with a lot of the senior officers. And I was one of the first ones that said, this guy that's now the commander of the country is not a friendly. He appears to be fine, but he better watch him.
Huh.
So I got a special interview with the ambassador and told him that.
Huh.
Turns out his wife had been telling him that she had a sixth sense.
Oh,
Anyway,
wow.
so that was a good thing. Anyway,
Were they able to head off some disturbances there, or a potential coup or something like that?
well, he was capable, but we he invited some of the Russians in,
Ah.
and it was a little different story than it had been.
Okay.
But because we talked about it with the deputy, with everybody, and I just became good friends with all of them, and they kind of realized that I had a special kind of entry to all this,
Mm-hmm.
and so it worked out real good for me, and we managed to kind of. He pretended to be a friend,
Mm-hmm.
but he
Right.
was a sneaky guy,
Okay.
and once they understood that, they kind of offered me. At one time, they were shelling. It was in a war, more or less internal,
Mm.
uh, but they were shelling the area of the embassy.
Wow.
And so I went in there with staff car and evacuated the whole gang. The ambassador, his wife. He was busy on the phone and all that.
Yeah.
So I took care of that, got them out safely, and brought them to my house, which was out more in the country, and it was safe.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was an interesting period.
Yeah,
Anyway,
no
it all
doubt.
worked out very good.
Well, no, I'm glad that it did. It's obviously one of many opportunities that you put yourself in quite a bit of danger, and you know, when an embassy has to be evacuated, you know, things are pretty serious. So that's
They were.
yeah,
They were.
yeah. So, you mentioned that your wife Nellie, that this was a particularly good move for her. She and your family, you know, moved to Madagascar. What was life like for them at that time?
She was used to taking care of the family, taking care of business, taking care of all the home items, taking care of her part of the embassy thing, and she was very good at it. Uh, Better than I thought. I was busy. Uh, when I
So she
finally,
got to sort of be a diplomat in her own right.
well, that's right.
Yeah.
And when they suggested that I kind of put a little more of the female side of it in the book, well, the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much she had done, and it was amazing. So one thing kind of led to another, and finally we got book size and all that, and it worked out good. But it made me realize that what my sons had done and what my wife had done was amazing. And so I expanded the book. We kind of interwove the things that they did, and that added, I think, quite a bit to the book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, we're speaking with Stan Luther. His book is A Lifetime in the Atmosphere, a memoir of flight. And I mean, putting together the book was quite a process. I know that our mutual friend Daniel Ulrich was involved in it. Why did you decide to bring forward this story and tell it at this stage of your life?
I had written in typical, I had written a lot of different things that went forward when I was squadron commander. But usually you'd be Churchill style, cut it down.
The great man theory of history, in other words.
Yes.
Right.
So.
And you were just an ordinary man.
Yeah.
who admittedly went through some pretty extraordinary things.
I did. A lot of it was because I volunteered for things.
So you got yourself in trouble.
I did. But I got out for most of it.
Good.
Anyway, it was an interesting period, to say the least.
Yeah.
And I was one that I turned down full colonel in a prime job. I was congressional inquiries in the Pentagon. And that was an important duty. And they would, working for the Secretary of the Air Force, you can imagine if you weren't thrown out of that job, it was trouble with Congress one way or another, then you were for sure going to be promoted.
Right.
Because you were thrown out. You're working for the Secretary of the Air Force congressional inquiries, answering it, incoming mail, and also and calls and what have you. Anyway, that was very important. I would have been automatically a full colonel, but I was staying in the Pentagon, and I was ready to go back to flying.
I guess you must have been a little frustrated with having to have a purely desk job, because at least in Madagascar you had a plane, as you mentioned.
I used that desk in inquiries all the time, and the boss was not a rated product, unusual.
Yeah.
And his theory, and he said so, you don't fly on my time. You fly on the weekend or at night. So, of course,
But I'm betting you took every chance you got.
I did. So that got me in a little trouble a time or two, but
Yeah.
We made it through that. But he was a guy that was a stickler, and you'd come in the morning, look at your desk, and see if there was a red flag on it. See me,
Yeah.
and hopefully not. It was an interesting period.
Yeah.
He was a good man, but he had his ways,
Right.
and boy, it was his way or the highway.
Right.
So that's what
I imagine you must have been involved in some congressional hearings at various times.
They had a whole section in that Congressional Inquiry Division that worked for the Secretary of the Air Force to deal with that particular situation. So I didn't personally know.
Okay. How did and you did get back to flying eventually? They couldn't keep you there forever.
They came in with a requirement to fill a fighter pilot. No, bombers at that time.
Yeah.
And so naturally, I picked that up, and I said, "I'll go," and surprised everybody because they thought they'd get that. It was one of those poking a face. They expected an answer of no.
Yeah.
And most people chose that route. Of course, I could have expected to, and I said, "I'll go."
Yeah, but you wanted to keep moving. You wanted to keep moving.
I wanted to go back to flying.
Exactly.
That was the right thing to do.
Right.
But I did it, and of course they accepted me. That was a plus. Ha 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 ha! We got you. Here's a guy who wants to go, and so I got it. Of course.
Yeah.
And off I went to bombers, B-47s.
Ah. So when you finally left the military, you didn't exactly retire, did you? you kept going.
As it turned out, there was a college that was looking for people that had an advanced degree and who were able to teach at night and all that. And so I went to work for City College, and I just flew on the extra, here and there, nothing to do with the job per se.
And I'm sorry, the City College was where?
It was headquartered in Seattle.
Got it.
It was part of the problem because all of the mechanism for the college was over in Seattle. I was at one of the satellite bases. It happened to be in Spokane.
Okay.
Spokane, Washington.
Right.
So I had very little contact with the boss, and he had a different concept. I called it mafia.
The academic mob, huh?
That was kind of a joke. Hello. Anyway, we didn't quite see eye to eye. I had a night school, and I was all for helping these people who they needed a degree in their job. It was going to be a professional deal. And so I tried to help them because I had that same kind of experience, 10 years of time in the senior year, finally qualified for bootstrap. So the Air Force helped me finish. And anyway, that's the way that went. So
wow. Okay, so you jumped out of the military and you jumped into the academic world and you pursued that for a while because one particular career wasn't enough for you.
About 2 years.
Wow.
First, one of my friends had gotten out of the military and he was down there teaching. He said, "You better come on down. This is great." So it was an interesting 2 years. Anyway, I went back. I got an instructor license and went back to flying full time. So that's where I belonged.
Wow. And to this day, and you moved around a little bit, and you eventually settled